we can start now with our first question. Uh, yes, first of all, let's assess the trend in the world regarding both land-based casinos and online gambling. It seems that even countries like Azerbaijan have started talking about legalizing gambling. What do you think about it?
Yes, so I think that, and I'm always saying, first of all, thank you for having me as your first podcast participant. It's a huge pleasure for me to be here and to be able to share a couple of thoughts and ideas about existing gambling trends and in our industry. So I think that, and I'm always saying that the legalization trend is something inevitable that no one can stop basically because on one hand more and more governments and more countries start to realize that it is simply not possible to forbid gambling in its entirety in the country because we all know that all over the world, including countries where gambling is not favored from the cultural perspective or from religious perspective, there is still a huge presence of offshore and unregulated operators in these countries, and this happens because, again, it is impossible to stop and to fully forbid and restrict any gambling operations. So the only question, and the only question with regard to the gambling legalization, in my point of view, is not whether or not it should be legalized. The only question is when it should be legalized, basically, because governments see and governments realize that they are simply losing money. They are losing their budget. They are losing on taxes. They are losing on international investment when they are restricting gambling. When they are trying to forbid any gambling operations in their countries, and because of that, we will see. I believe that in the future, in the future 3 or 4 years or 5 years, we will see more and more countries either legalizing in case such countries are now unregulated, or we will see jurisdictions with an outdated regulations to reforming their regulations and to creating a more modern and more sustainable gambling framework in the country. So yeah, I think that this is something that we need to expect, and I think that everyone in our industry should be prepared one way or another to a future and in terms of legalizations and reforms of gambling industry around the world.
So we can say that legalizing gambling is inevitable for countries, right?
I think that yes, this is something that yeah, I totally agree with this because again, let's divide this discussion into two parts because
Yes.
when we are speaking about land-based gambling, obviously it is possible to create a large set of restrictions in the country and make sure that there at least there would be no huge casinos in the city. Again, we will always find small illegal gambling parlors in any city in the world, but it would not be again a huge casino in the hotels. There would be no casino advertising in the country. So this is possible, and this is something that, well, again, is happening everywhere. And I think, and I'm not really a land-based guy, but from my point of view, land-based gambling and land-based sector could be contained by the government in a little bit more effective way than online. Because when we're speaking about online, I think that everybody can agree that it is simply not possible for the government or for the state to somehow restrict or contain online operations. Because again, modern gambling and modern online gambling is, well, has its roots in the IT industry, a lot of I industries right now. And since it has its roots in the IT industry, gambling companies from online space, they will be always 1, 2, 3, 4, or even 5 or even 10 steps ahead of the government when it comes to working in their country, when it comes to reaching their customers. And the only way for the government to control and to ensure that people would be protected is to work on the legalization and to see how to regulate gambling, because an outright restriction on any online gambling is not gambling regulations in my view.
Yeah, I agree with you totally. The next question is, so like we talked about the legalizing gambling, but what is the biggest challenge in gambling industry now? What do you think?
I think that it depends on the point of view that we are using to find this biggest challenge. Because for the operators, I think, and again, I suggest you ask these questions to everyone on your podcast to have this really interesting possibility to compare what people from different areas of the industry are saying. But from where I stand, I think that the biggest challenge right now for the operators is, again, the ongoing development of the industry as a multinational and multi-jurisdictional industry, and the necessity to be able to work simultaneously in the huge amount of countries. And I think that in any case, one way or another, any gambling operator will face this issue and will be required to understand how to work in India, how to work in Brazil, what to anticipate from Ukraine. I don't know, like how to expand into African countries. And this is something that my company and we are facing every day in our work. For the governments and for the countries, from this point of view, I think that the biggest challenge is to find how to protect their own people while having a sustainable and workable industry. Because again, circling back to what I mentioned earlier, in any case, online gambling and iGaming operators, they always will be a lot of steps ahead of the government. So essentially, the government needs to find a way to incentivize these operators to work in the country legally. And I believe that you already seen and you already heard this sentiment from top managers of worldwide gambling companies, that practically each and every international and huge gambling company is constantly communicating that we are ready to work legally. We are looking for the possibility to work in the regulated field. We would like to pay taxes. We would like to employ local employees. We would like to make these investments in the country. But we need this, like, it's not opportunity, but we need this possibility to be able to do so. Because, and I think that we can discuss this also later, but it also has a lot with the quality and with the quality of the regulations and with the level of the understanding of gambling industry from the side of the government and from the side of the regulator. So I think that for the governments, the biggest challenge is to find this sweet spot where, on the one hand, they are able to invite and are able to work with the biggest names in the industry, and on the other hand, they are able to ensure that people in the country will be protected from obvious negative effects that excessive gambling has on people. So I think that this is the biggest challenge for the government. As to maybe generally for the industry, and I'm always saying that in my point of view, from my point of view, this is the biggest challenge, is to continue our common efforts to overcome the existing gambling stigma. Because I just returned from SBC Barcelona, and well, there was 6,000 people who were invested, who were interested, and very bright and very brilliant people who were interested in the industry, who are part of this industry. And for me, when I visit such events, when I see everything that is happening there, for me it's always a little sad to realize that on the one hand we have these top professionals, we have this really involved and really smart and really bright people who are working in the gambling industry. But on the other hand, it is again still in 2022, it's a constant stigma on gambling, that gambling is something evil and gambling is creating a lot of risks and a lot of negative sides for the society. And I think that this is something that you and I and everyone in the industry should keep in mind when intersecting with anyone outside our industry, that we need to uphold this standard of professional, of involved and experienced people who are ready to work in one of the most complex industries, I think, in the world.
Yes, thank you. Next question is people often talk about the principles of responsible gaming. What do you think is the solution? How the modern world should fight gaming addiction? It's somehow a connection of the stigma too and the protection that you talked about in the previous question.
Well, I think that from my point of view, obviously, responsible gambling is a huge part of the set of different concepts and mechanisms that allows us to try and overcome this stigma. Because without responsible gambling and without having this understanding of the harm that gambling can cause, it would be definitely, we would not be able to do anything with the existing attitude towards our industry and towards this kind of entertainment. But I think that the most important thing about responsible gambling today is to make sure that this work and anything that we are discussing will continue and will not stop at the stage of discussion. Because I have sometimes seen in different jurisdictions that the regulators and operators, they're trying to initiate some wide discussion and wide dialogue between each other about how we should regulate responsible gambling and how we should implement it into everyday activity of gambling operators. But sometimes maybe it's because people in governments in post-Soviet territory, they are not really familiar with the deep meaning, and they do not have deep understanding of responsible gambling. But sometimes I see that basically the only instrument and the only mechanism that is being implemented is just some kind of a sentence in the below of the advertisement. That you need to gamble responsibly, and that's it. And people sometimes are saying that, listen, we are doing it in the same fashion as in the UK, but in the same time in the UK, in addition to this sign, there is also game care, there is also profound and relatively stringent regulation with regard to how operators should work from the side of responsible gambling. There are fully separate departments that are handling responsible gambling measures, and biggest companies and biggest names in the industry, they are dedicating their time, resources, and, well, most of all, I think, money to ensuring that they are fully involved and fully understand how to protect their customers. Because in the end of the day, and I think again in 2022, this would be the right statement to make, that today gambling is a form of entertainment industry. Again, in the end of the day, we are our objective and our goal is to entertain people and entertain customers, entertain players, and the operators, they're trying to find this approach that would allow to keep the entertainment on the level that would entertain their customers, but at the same time to keep the harm at bay. So, in my view, before initiating and implementing any responsible gambling mechanisms, it is very important to understand how does it work in practice when we are trying to see from the perspective of international experience. Look at the UK, look at the European Union, look even at the United States. You can find a lot of examples of how the regulator can either stimulate operators to implement responsible gambling measures on a statewide front, or how the government or the regulator are doing this themselves. So I think that this is something that really very important today, and I'm really happy that I see, on one hand, I'm really happy that I see this trend and I see this interest in responsible gambling in our region. But on the other hand, I do not see, sometimes I feel that more knowledge and more understanding would be beneficial for this discussion to result in something that definitely will change the face of the industry today.
Okay, I totally agree with you. Another question is, does more regulation mean a better regulated field, and what can wrong regulations lead to in a gaming business?
I wouldn't say that. This is
because, now people think that if government have more regulations against the gambling business, it means that they will decrease the number of gamblers. So I think that it's not true and it's not rational. So I want to ask you about this.
Well, I think that it's when I see a similar approach and I hear similar arguments, it's always funny to me, and it's always I'm always trying to understand how more regulations. So more regulations means basically that yesterday the regulations include, I don't know, 2 laws and 5 subsequent regulatory acts, and the total count of pages were, I don't know, 1,000, and tomorrow we will have 2,000 pages and twice as more legislative acts. And how this quantitative approach could really lead to less exposure to harm from gambling in the country or something like that. I really don't know. I genuinely don't understand that. But I think that essentially the regulations and regulating of gambling is really complicated task, because again, and I always say this when I speak with the governments, with the regulators around the world, that the gambling regulations process is essentially the process of finding the right balance and finding the compromise, because there are a lot of different stakeholders in the industry, and all these stakeholders, and this is logical and this is rational, they're pursuing their own interests. Government tries to get their taxes and protect people. Operators trying to get as much as possible of the market and get the return of their investments when they're entering the market. Players are trying to entertain themselves, and some of them are trying to win some money. So it's a complex structure, and all these stakeholders, they need to have this feeling that their particular pain points are addressed in the regulation. And I think that, getting back to your particular question, I don't think that level playing field can be created only because of the regulation, but it also can be destroyed because of the regulation. And this is, I think, the most important thing that you need to understand when you are trying to find this connection between regulations on one hand and the situation on the market on the other. Because essentially wrongly understood and wrongly written regulations and or underdeveloped regulations, they simply can make the market unsustainable, and this particular market and this particular country will be back to square one, where we have a lot of offshore operators in the country and 1, 2, 3, 4, I don't know, local operators that manage to get a license, and that's it. And still, all of the issues that made the legalization process necessary, no taxes, no player protection, no international investment, they are still, after the legalization process and after the legislation is introduced, they are still unresolved. So this is, I guess, well, I would say that this is my take on how the regulations can affect the market. But again, I think that it is very crucial and very important to have this open dialogue between all stakeholders when the regulations are underway. So yeah.
Yeah. The next question is one of the main issue about in gambling industry is the money laundering and like fighting against it. Now, like Georgian companies who are operating in Georgia actively fight against the money laundering. And what do you think? What are the effective ways to fight this kind of crime in gambling business?
Well, I think that
Because it's one of the main issue, I think, that for every country.
yes, exactly. And well, I think that one way or another, my thoughts on your questions are getting back to the same point and to the same issue of regulation. Because in my view, anti-money laundering situation and anti-money laundering risks, they can be resolved again only by having a thorough licensing procedures, by having a thorough KYC and KYB and IMN procedures that are being installed on the side of the operator. Because and also on the side of the regulator, when the regulator needs to verify whether or not the money that the future operator, the applicant for a license, decided to bring to the country, whether or not this money, well, essentially is legit and the source of this money is legitimate. But in the same time, also it is important to have this common sense, I would say, because sometimes in different jurisdictions we see that anti-money laundering regulations and restrictions, they're getting to the point when you need to present to the bank or to other financial institution the information about the color of your door in your flat in order to prove that you are genuine or something like that. So sometimes these rules and these mechanisms, they can be too stringent, but I think that still I wouldn't say that we are now at the stage when we really need to think about relaxing this mechanism, because I'm not like a crypto enthusiast, and but I'm not against the crypto industry, obviously, and it would be stupid if I would be against it. But also taking into account the fact that there is, well, almost parallel financial industry that is revolving around cryptocurrencies, and that is not really okay. It's not like this right now, and I would say that it's more something from the past. But again, in the past years, cryptocurrencies and crypto industry, I would say, was one of the main sources of anti-money laundering risk, because of the fact that because of the fact that this industry was not actively regulated, and it's, well, getting to be regulated only in the past few years again. So I think that it's still important to have this full understanding of the source of funds and generally of the well, generally of the how your counterparty, how your partner, how they get their money and get their income. Because again, information allows us to see whether or not there is money laundering. So I believe that this is a really important part of any regulations today, but still it is important to search and to find the balance between having too stringent AML regulations on one hand and not having them at all.
Mm-hmm. And the last question for our podcast is like, what recommendations would you give to those who are interested in investing in post-Soviet countries like Ukraine, Georgia? What are your recommendations?
I think that your podcast will be the first place where I will openly tell this. But my best recommendation would be to get as much information and knowledge and understanding of the local aspects and local peculiarities of this market as possible. Because from my experience and what I see from my clients, it's something that I see not every day, but really, really, it happens with me, a lot of time. I see that people and potential clients and my clients, they come to me after they waste like 6 or 9 months trying to get some information that essentially was like in the law, for instance. And instead of getting to finding like local lawyers or reading the law by themselves, they are deciding to speak with people on the ground who are not lawyers, who are not understanding how the regulatory part works. Because and I'm not trying to push the regulatory aspect on the forefront of what we are doing in the industry, because obviously I'm not stupid. I understand that regulatory aspects are like secondary and goals, but they are not something that every gambling company CEO thinking every morning. But when you are thinking about getting into new markets, when you're thinking about getting into a new region, you will not avoid thinking and discussing regulations. So my advice, I think, would be to get this genuine and accurate information about the market, because otherwise you will still waste time, you will waste money, and most importantly, you can get some information about the market, make some conclusions, which would be wrong in the end of the day. When you get to the stage when you are reading the regulations and you're actually seeing how does this particular question is regulated in this country. So, and this is especially applicable to post-Soviet countries, because the legal system here that is still heavily influenced by Soviet legal system requires a thorough attention and thorough understanding of what is going on. It's different than European Union, it's different than Latin America, and it's something else. And owing to that, it is really, really important to, again, get this knowledge and get this understanding from the ground and from the people who are, experts in the region and experts in the particular country.
Thank you so much, Ilya. It was really interesting, and it was a pleasure for me talking with you and reviewing really important issues in gambling industry.